Simone Park had buried 1,000 secrets. She never saw the one in her own bed. She was 3 steps from the pool when she saw him, Damon, his back to her, at the far end where the cabanas threw their shadow. She almost called his name. She had a bottle of wine sweating in her hand and a speech she'd rehearsed across an ocean. "I came to fight for us." Then she saw the woman. Hands on his chest, his mouth at her throat, a young woman laughing low against him, easy and unhurried, as if they'd done this 100 times. Simone stopped. She didn't scream. Something else happened, the thing that happened only in the worst rooms of her working life. The world pulled back like a tide and left everything far away and very clear. The wine went cold against her palm, and she felt the exact temperature of the glass. Her pulse slowed. She stood at the edge of the deck in her pale linen dress and watched her marriage end, frame by frame. And she made no sound at all, because sound was for people who hadn't spent a decade learning to stand inside a catastrophe without moving. She had built her whole life so she would never be the woman at the edge of that pool. People called Simone Park when their lives caught fire. A fixer, though no one said the word, and her name lived on no document anywhere on Earth. The chairman's son, photographed somewhere ruinous. The merger that needed a body buried before the regulators came. The 100-year name hanging by a thread at 3 a.m. They dialed a number that never rang in her home, and she made the impossible vanish. She read people the way others read weather. She knew the shape of a lie before it finished forming. She had not seen this one, the one that had slept beside her for 2 years. She backed away a step, then another. Damon never turned, and the cruelest fact of her life arranged itself with terrible clarity. I know, and he doesn't. He was still down there, certain of his clever weekend, certain of his oblivious wife at home. The power had changed hands, and he hadn't felt it leave the room. She turned and walked back the way she'd come. Need to know what she does next? Subscribe and stay with me. She had given up everything to be his wife, and that was the part that would find her later, in the dark. Not the betrayal, the arithmetic of it. She had been Simone Carter once, with people in Atlanta who loved her loudly and told her, every one of them, that she was making a mistake. She chose Damon over her mother's tears, over a Sunday table that no longer set her place. She learned his language down to the bone, late nights conjugating verbs until Korean lived in her mouth as easily as English, so she could love him in the language of his blood. She crossed the sea and made herself small in a city of 8 million strangers. Family, country, the very shape of her name. She gave it all away. For this. 20 minutes earlier, she'd been a different woman. In that same lobby, minutes before, she'd been calling Damon to say she was here, and his phone went dark to voicemail, and a man crossed her path. Tall, unhurried, dressed in the kind of money that doesn't raise its voice. He paused, the way people sometimes did near her, registering something they couldn't name. A bellhop jostled her, her bag spilled, and in the choreography of apology, one of her cards ended up in his hand. Plain, only a number. The card she gave to no one and everyone. He looked at it, then at her, and something moved behind his stillness. "감사합니다," she murmured. "Thank you," reaching for it. He kept it, slid it into his breast pocket with the ghost of a question on his face. She let him. She had a marriage to save. She didn't know his name was Seo Jin-ho. She didn't know he'd followed the same path to the pool and arrived in time to witness the same thing she did, and to watch how she took it. He'd spent his whole life around people who broke. He knew the sound a person made when they shattered. This woman made none. She absorbed the blow the way the sea absorbs a stone, and turned, and walked away with her spine straight and her face calm. And Seo Jin-ho, a man only ever feared, only ever used, never once in his life wanted for himself, did not forget her. He said nothing. He let her go. But he kept the card. She didn't cry in the elevator. She didn't cry on the flight back to Seoul. That night, she called Jiwoo, Han Jiwoo, her one anchor in Seoul, the friend from her American college years who'd improbably washed up in the same city a world later, a prosecutor now with a spine of iron. They never discussed their work. Confidentiality ran like a wall down the middle of their friendship and somehow made it stronger. And for the length of one call, Simone let herself be the woman at the edge of the deck. "I gave him everything," she said, and her voice cracked, the thing it never did at work. "I can't even go home, Jiwoo. There's no home left. I burned it down myself." Then Damon came back from his restful weekend. He came through the door 2 days later, tanned and easy, with a story about a conference that ran long and a spa, and how he wished she'd been there. "보고 싶었어," he said. "I missed you," and kissed her cheek. Simone smiled at him with a warmth that cost her more than any job she'd ever done, said she'd missed him too, and let him lie. She let him perform his innocence across the dinner table while she cataloged each false note, already moving money, copying records, building the architecture of an exit that would land before he ever felt the ground move. The fixer had a new client now, herself. She confronted him 3 weeks later, every piece in place, over breakfast on an ordinary Tuesday. "Sit down. I want to talk about Jeju." He smiled, buttering toast. "What about it? You should have come. You would have—" "Her name is Yuna." A folder hit the table between the coffee and the fruit. "Your assistant. Lotte Cabana, the third one, around 7. I have the times. I have the photographs. So let's skip the part where you tell me I imagined it." The knife stopped. "Simone, denial first. You always lead with denial. You went through my— and now anger." Her voice never lifted. She poured her coffee. "Go ahead. Get it out." "It wasn't— she means nothing. It was stupid. It happened once." His hands had started to move, the way they did when he was losing the thread of a story. "Baby, look at me." And now the collapse. She watched him fold. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything." And felt nothing move in her at all. That was worse than rage. She let him finish, then, quietly, "You underestimated me. Everyone does. I used to think that was my advantage." She closed the folder. "It was always going to be your mistake." She stood. The lawyer was retained, the accounts split, the evidence beyond argument. She'd won 3 weeks ago. This was only telling him. She walked out the way she'd walked from the pool, straight-backed, dry-eyed, free. She thought that was the end of the story. It was the beginning. The call came weeks later, on the number from the card. A low, unhurried voice, a delicate matter, a meeting. She didn't recognize it. She agreed, because that was the work. And when she walked into the back room of a restaurant with no sign on its door and saw the stranger from the lobby, the one who'd kept her card, she understood the universe had a sense of humor, and that it was not a kind one. "You," she said. "Mrs. Park." Then, watching her with great care, "Ms. Carter." She didn't sit. "You've done your homework. That's usually my part of the conversation." "I did very little. You handed me your card. I only kept it. People who keep my card want something they can't ask for out loud." She sat, finally, because not sitting was its own kind of flinch. "So, what is it you can't say?" "You're direct. You're paying for direct. Men who want flattery hire someone cheaper." She held his eyes. "I'll ask once, and I'll know if you lie. How bad is it?" Something moved behind the stillness. Not offense, closer to interest. "Most people are careful with me." You watched me at that pool. You saw what I do when the worst thing happens." She didn't blink. "So let's not pretend either of us is going to blink first." For a long moment, he just looked at her, the way a man looks at a thing he wasn't expecting to find. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think you will." She took the job. She told herself it was only the job. He knew, of course. He'd carried what he saw at that pool for weeks like a coal in his pocket, and now he'd set her real name between them like an offering. It put them at a strange angle from the first word. He had seen her broken. She hadn't yet seen him at all. And when she looked at him, she didn't see his power. She saw the man. That was what undid him. People had feared him his whole life, used him, obeyed him. Not one had ever simply looked at him as someone worth knowing. She did it without trying, and he couldn't stop thinking about it after she'd gone. It built the way pressure builds before weather. Once, over a document, his hand came to rest near hers, not touching, a breath apart, and neither moved away as fast as they should have. Once she caught him watching her across a restaurant, and he didn't look away when she met his eyes. He held it, unhurried, until she was the one who had to drop her gaze, her pulse loud in her ears. Once, late, she handed him a glass, and their fingers overlapped on the cold of it a second too long, and he said her name. Simone. Just that, just the sound of it. She went home and lay awake, and told herself she was a professional, that she'd just clawed out of one ruinous love and would not walk into another. Then she found out what he was. It came the way these things always did, through the work. She pulled one thread following his money, and the whole curtain came down. The legitimate billionaire dissolved into the thing beneath. So Jin-ho was a mafia boss. She sat with it in the cold light of her screen, very still. Every instinct a decade in the shadows had given her stood up at once. Close the account, return the retainer, forget his face. Walk out tonight while walking out is still free. She'd been hired, more than once, to clean up what was left of people who got close to men like this. And underneath the alarm, quieter and far more dangerous, was the thing she didn't want to look at. That her first thought hadn't been run. It had been his name. The table where his hand rested near hers. The way he'd said Simone in the dark. She was already too deep to obey her own instincts, and that frightened her more than what he was. But in the same digging, she'd caught what didn't fit a monster. Lines he refused to cross, deals he'd walked from at real cost. And above him, larger shadows, men he answered to who had no lines at all, names that made hardened people go quiet. She filed it away, the way she filed everything that might one day matter. She didn't yet know it would save them both, so she went looking for a reason to leave him. That's what she told herself she was doing when she started pulling the charity threads, foundations, anonymous transfers running in steady, disciplined streams out of accounts that had no business being clean. She expected blood money laundered into respectability. She wanted it. The worst would let her go. She sat down at her screen one night, fully intending to find the rot. She found a children's home outside Busan, then another in Daegu. Then a list. She kept scrolling, waiting for the catch, the kickback, the laundering mechanism that would turn it ugly. And it never came. The transfers were just what they looked like. Dozens of homes for abandoned children across the whole country, funded quietly for years by a man who took no credit, whose own world would have called him weak if it ever learned he had a heart. She stopped scrolling. She sat very still in the dark with the screen lighting her face, and the thing she'd braced against all night arrived from a direction she hadn't guarded. Because she knew his file. She knew he'd been an orphan, a child with no one, no name worth keeping, no Sunday table anywhere on earth. And he had taken the exact shape of his own abandonment and turned it inside out. Now there were thousands of children who would never know the cold he'd known, because the man the world only feared was standing in the dark between them and it, where no one could see him do it. She'd come hunting for a reason to walk away. She was sitting in front of a reason to fall. She went to him. She confronted him, because she confronted everyone. But her voice wasn't a fixer's voice now, and they both heard it. I found the orphanages. He went still in a different way. Not the menace. Something exposed. That wasn't in what I hired you for. No, it wasn't. She watched him brace, the way powerful men brace to be asked for something. I'm not going to use it. I just want to know why. For a long moment, nothing. Then, not quite to her. 아무도 그 아이들을 원하지 않았어. Nobody wanted those children. He looked at his hands. I know what that costs. What it does to you, growing up knowing nobody came. The smallest pause. Nobody came for me. The armor came off them both in the same breath. She understood him then with a completeness that frightened her. She who had lost a family, he who had never had one. Two people of broken belonging, recognizing the break in each other across a quiet room. A matched set, the one who lost a family and the one who never had one. She crossed the distance without deciding to, or he did, and when he kissed her, it was nothing like a man taking something. It was a man who had never once been chosen, being chosen. And a woman who'd given everything to the wrong person, feeling, for the first time, that she might have something left to give. She was the one who pulled back, a few inches. Both of them unsteady, his forehead nearly against hers, neither willing to let go of the other's hands. If we don't stop now, she said, very low, I don't think I'll find the line again. I know, he said. Neither of them stepped back. The rain had started somewhere over the city, soft against the windows of his apartment, and Jinho was at the stove doing something with his sleeves rolled up that she hadn't known he could do. You cook, Simone said from the doorway. One thing, badly. He didn't look up. The woman at the third home taught me when I was 9. It's the only recipe I have. She crossed the kitchen and stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth coming off him, and watched his hands move with the careful focus he brought to everything. He glanced at her sideways. Something in his face unguarded in a way the rest of the world never got to see. Majiso? He asked when he held out the spoon. Is it good? She tasted it. Majiso, she said, and meant it. And he smiled, a real one, rare as snow. And for a moment there was no empire under him and no past behind her. Just two people in a warm kitchen while it rained. She thought, maybe this is the one that doesn't break. Then, 2 days later, over coffee, Ji-woo said his name. They were at their usual place, the small cafe near the courthouse where they'd met every week for 2 years. Ji-woo looked exhausted and lit up at the same time, the way she always did when a case finally cracked open. She leaned in over her cup and dropped her voice. I shouldn't even be telling you this, but I've been chasing one man for 3 years, Simone. The whole network runs through him, and I think I finally got a way in. Simone smiled, the easy smile she gave everyone. That's huge. 3 years. He's careful. He's clean on paper. Too clean. But I'll get him. Ji-woo turned her cup in her hands. So Jin-ho. That's the name. You wouldn't have heard it. Nobody has. That's what makes him dangerous. Simone held her coffee very, very still. The cafe didn't change. The espresso machine still hissed. Ji-woo was still talking, something about financial records, something about patience. But the two halves of Simone's life, the past she'd survived and the present she'd let herself believe in, had just collided in a single sentence over a cafe table. And she felt the floor of everything tilt beneath her. The man she loved was the man her best friend had sworn 3 years of her life to destroy. And she couldn't say a word. She couldn't warn Ji-woo without exposing Jin-ho. She couldn't tell Jin-ho the prosecutor closing in on him was the one person in Seoul Simone would die for. She sat there with the fixer's face on, the face that had watched a marriage end without breaking. And she nodded, and she asked the next question. And with that one question, she began to lie to the only person who had never lied to her. How close are you, really? Closer than I've ever been. Ji-woo's eyes shone. I just need the thread that ties him to the money. And I'll find it. I always do. I know exactly where that thread is, Simone thought. I'm the one who hid it. She drove home with both hands tight on the wheel and her mind running the problem from every angle, the way it ran every problem, looking for the door, the fix, the third option that always existed if you were clever enough. There wasn't one. Not yet. There was only the impossible arithmetic. Protect the man she loved, or protect the woman who'd held her together the night her marriage died. There was no version where she kept them both. So she started to do the unforgivable thing. The first move was a witness, a mid-level accountant named Cho, who'd kept a second set of records and was 3 days from handing them to the prosecutor's office. Simone found him at a noodle shop near his home, sat down across from him uninvited, and slid a folder across the table without a word. Inside were photographs of his daughter's school, his mortgage, refinanced twice, a wire transfer he'd buried 4 years ago that no one was supposed to find. I'm not here to threaten you, she said quietly. And that was true. Threats were crude, and she didn't work crude. I'm here to tell you what happens to a man who testifies and the case still falls apart. He's exposed, and the protection he counted on is gone. I'd hate for that to be you. She let him look at the photo of the school a moment longer. Or you could remember that you never saw anything, and go home tonight, and stay there. His hands were shaking when she stood. By morning, Cho's lawyer had called the prosecutor's office to say his client had nothing further to offer. That was the one that broke something in her. Because Cho wasn't a monster. He was a frightened man who tried to do the right thing, and she'd just walked into his life and made sure he couldn't. She did it for Jin-ho. She did it against Ji-woo. And it was a Tuesday, and she went home and made dinner and answered Ji-woo's text about the weekend like none of it had happened. She told Jin-ho none of it. She couldn't. To tell him the prosecutor was Ji-woo would be to hand him a name, and she had spent her whole career learning what men in his world did with names. So she protected him from one side and protected Ji-woo from the other, alone in the middle, the only bridge between two people who didn't know the other existed. And she carried the whole weight of it without setting a single piece of it down. The coffees got harder. Because Ji-woo didn't pull away, she leaned in. She trusted Simone more, not less, as the case ground on, brought her frustrations to the table every week, the dead ends, the late nights, the certainty that someone on the inside was working against her. There's someone protecting him, Ji-woo said one evening, rubbing her eyes. I can feel it. Every time I get close, the ground moves. Somebody good is cleaning up behind him. She let out a tired laugh. You'd actually understand this part. You're the only one I can really talk to about it. Everyone at the office is so careful around me. You just... Listen. Simone reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. I'm always going to listen. I know. Ji-woo squeezed back. That's why you're the one person in this city I'd trust with anything. And Simone smiled and held her friend's hand, and was, in that exact moment, the someone good cleaning up behind him. She went home and sat in the dark a long time without turning on the lights, the shape of Cho's shaking hands still in front of her. Around then, the past she thought she'd closed sent up one last flare. Yuna, Damon's Yuna, surfaced in a photograph at a gallery opening on the arm of a man twice Damon's net worth, laughing the same easy laugh she'd laughed at the Jeju pool. Simone saw it almost by accident and felt nothing but a cold, clarifying certainty. The girl had never wanted Damon. She'd wanted a ladder, and Damon had been one rung, and she was already standing on a higher one. Simone closed the photo and didn't think about it again. She had no room left for the past. The present was closing around her like a fist, because Jiwoo was getting closer. Simone could see it in the way her friend talked, the questions getting sharper, the map of the network filling in. Whatever Simone hid, Jiwoo found another way around it. She was relentless, and she was brilliant, and she was being beaten by someone she couldn't see, and it was eating her alive. Every week she came to the cafe a little more certain the answer was almost in her hands, and Simone, who had built a life out of carrying other people's secrets without ever buckling, was buckling now. Because those had been strangers' secrets, and this one had her own heart on both sides of it. She loved them both. She betrayed one of them every day to protect the other. She kept telling herself she'd find the fix before it broke. Then, on a gray Thursday afternoon, her phone rang, and it was Jiwoo, and her voice was electric. "Simone, I found it." Words tumbling out, breathless. 3 years, and I finally have it. The thread, the thing that ties him to the money. Simone went still in the middle of her kitchen. "Slow down. You found what?" "The fixer. The invisible one. The someone who's been protecting him from the inside this whole time. I finally figured out how they've been doing it." A sharp, exhilarated breath. "And once I find out who they are, I have him. I have all of it. Whoever's been hiding him, they made one mistake. And I'm going to pull this whole thing apart by that one thread." Simone gripped the counter. "I'm so close I can taste it," Jiwoo said. "Can I come over? I have to talk this through with someone I trust. You're the only one I trust with this, Simone. You're the only one." And Simone, the fixer, the someone good, the one mistake at the end of Jiwoo's thread, heard herself say very calmly, "Of course. Come over." She set down the phone. The thread Jiwoo was about to pull led to exactly one place. It led to her. The doorbell rang at 7. Simone opened the door, and Jiwoo stood there with her laptop bag over her shoulder and a fire in her eyes. And for one last second, they were just two friends, the way they'd been for years. Then Jiwoo stepped inside, set her bag on the table, pulled out her files, and began to lay the thread on the table piece by piece. And Simone watched her own work come into view through her best friend's eyes. Jiwoo talked fast, brilliant, connecting it the way only she could, the witness who went silent, the document that never surfaced, the shell company restructured a week too early. Each move traced back and back to a single invisible hand. A fixer. Someone with access. Someone who knew the case from the inside. Someone close. "Whoever it is," Jiwoo said, spreading the last page out, "they were good, better than anyone I've ever chased, but they got sloppy once. Here," she tapped the page. "Cho, the accountant. Somebody got to him 3 days before he was going to testify. Somebody who knew he was going to testify, which means somebody who knew what was in my case file." She looked up, eyes shining. "It's somebody close to me, Simone. That's the part that kills me. It has to be." Simone looked at the page, at Cho's name, at her own fingerprints, invisible to everyone in the world except the one woman now sitting at her kitchen table. She could have lied. She was the best liar she knew. She could have said the right words and steered Jiwoo gently down the wrong road, and bought Jinho another month. She looked at her friend's face, open, trusting, certain she was sitting across from the one person in Seoul who would never hurt her. And she found that she could not do it again. "Ji-woo," she said quietly. "Put the files down." Something in her voice. Ji-woo went still. "What?" It was me. The kitchen was very quiet. The words sat there in the air between them, and Simone watched them land, watched her friend's face move from confusion to disbelief to the slow, dawning horror of a brilliant mind assembling a picture it did not want to see. "No," Ji-woo said. "Cho, the document, the shell company, all of it." Simone's voice didn't break. It was the steadiest thing in the room, and that was the cruelest part. It was me. The whole time. "No!" Ji-woo was on her feet now, the chair scraping back. "No, you don't even know him. You don't have anything to do with—" And then she stopped, because the mind that had chased Seo Jin-ho for 3 years was already there, already past her, already standing at the terrible conclusion. "You know him." A whisper. "You know him." "Yes." "How?" "I work for him." Simone made herself say it. "And I'm in love with him." She watched it hit. Watched 3 years of trust, of cafe tables, of "you're the only one I trust." Watched all of it detonate in a single second across her best friend's face. Ji-woo took a step back like she'd been struck. "Every week," Ji-woo said. Her voice had gone strange and flat. "Every week you sat across from me. I told you everything. I told you about the inside man. I cried to you about the inside man. And the whole time, it was you." The laugh that came out of her was awful. "I trusted you with the one thing in my life I couldn't trust anyone with. And you used it. You sat there and you used it to protect him." "I know." "Don't." Ji-woo's eyes were wet and furious. "Don't you dare be calm right now. Don't you dare do the voice." And Simone, who had watched her own marriage die without making a sound, felt her composure crack straight down the middle at last. Because this was the one person it had never been armor against. "I didn't know how to choose," she said, and her voice finally broke. "I couldn't warn you without giving him your name. Do you understand what they'd do with your name? I couldn't tell him who you were because I will not lose you. I have nobody, Ji-woo. I gave it all up. You're the only family I have left, and he's the only— and I couldn't—" She stopped. "There was no version where I didn't betray someone I love. I have been drowning in it for months." "You should have told me." Ji-woo's voice shook. "You should have trusted me the way I trusted you." "I know. I would have figured something out. We would have—" Ji-woo pressed her hand to her mouth, and for a moment the prosecutor was gone, and only the friend was left, devastated. "You did to me exactly what he did to you. You know that? You stood there at that pool, and you swore you'd never— and then you turned around and did the same thing to me. The lying, the smiling, the letting me believe." It landed like nothing else could have, because it was true. Simone had become, to the one person she loved most, the thing that had broken her. "I know," she said. "I know exactly what I am." Ji-woo grabbed her bag. At the door, she turned, and her face was wet, and her voice was the coldest Simone had ever heard it. I'm still going to bring him down. And I'm not going to look away when it takes you with him." The door closed, and Simone stood alone in her kitchen, having finally, at long last, lost everything, and understood that the only way out was the one move she had left. She had spent her whole career finding the door no one else could see. Now she went looking for it in the dark, in the one direction she'd been too afraid to look. Up, at the men above Jin-ho. Because she remembered what she'd filed away the day she learned what he was. Jin-ho had lines he wouldn't cross. The men above him had none. Traffickers. Killers. The ones he'd spent years keeping his hands clean of. The ones whose names made hardened people go quiet. She started pulling those threads now, quietly, carefully, the most dangerous work she'd ever done. And what she found was worse than she'd feared, and exactly what she needed. Then she went to Jin-ho, and she told him everything. She told him the prosecutor was her best friend. She told him what she'd done to protect him and what it had cost her. And then she told him the only way through, the fix that would damn him and save him in the same stroke. "You can't outrun her," she said. "She's too good. She will have you, Jin-ho. It's only a question of when. But you have something she wants more than you." She held his eyes. "The men above you. The ones you've spent your whole life refusing to become. Give her them." He went very still. He understood it instantly. She could see that. He understood exactly what she was asking, and exactly what it would cost, and for a long moment he said nothing at all. He walked to the window. The man who had built an empire out of having nothing stood looking out over the city he'd ruled from the shadows, and Simone watched him hold the whole weight of it. "Everything I have," he said finally, "I built so that no one could ever take it from me again. So that I would never be that boy with nothing." He didn't turn around. "And you're asking me to give all of it away. The money, the name, my freedom. To become, on purpose, the boy with nothing all over again." "I am," she said quietly. "I won't pretend I'm not. They'll know it was me who talked, the men above me." Now he did turn, and his voice was low. "They'll spend whatever it takes. I'll be a marked man for the rest of my life. You understand that?" "I do." "Years in a cell, and a price on me when I walk out, if I walk out at all." He searched her face. "Why would I do that? Tell me honestly, not the strategy. Why?" And Simone, who only ever told people what they needed to hear, told him the truth instead. "Because you've been the thing the world made you since you were 9 years old," she said. "Feared, used, never once just a man. This is the only door I've ever found that lets you put it down. You'd serve real time, yes, you'd lose all of it. But those children would be funded in the open, clean, by a foundation no one could ever touch. And you would be free of being him." Her voice dropped. "You spent your whole life as the crime lord because nobody ever gave you the chance to be anything else. I'm giving it to you. It's the worst gift anyone will ever offer you, and it's the only real one." He was quiet for a long time. The city glittered behind him, the empire that had cost him his whole soul to build. "그 아이들은," he said at last, "and the children." "Protected. I'll see to it myself. I promise you that with my life." He looked at her, the man who had never once been chosen, being asked now to give up everything by the only person who had ever chosen him. "If I do this," he said, "I lose you too, for years." You won't, Simone said. I'll be there when you walk out. Every day of it, I'll be there at the end. I swear it to you. And So Jin-ho, who had spent his entire life trusting no one, looked at the woman who'd come hunting for a reason to leave him and found a reason to fall. And he made the only truly free choice he had ever made. All right, he said. Tear it down. He turned himself into Ji-woo's weapon. What followed was the case of Han Ji-woo's career. With Jin-ho as her state's witness, the empire she'd chased for 3 years cracked open and kept cracking, past him, above him, to the men she'd never have reached on her own. The traffickers, the killers, the names that made people go quiet. Jin-ho gave her all of it, and in giving it, dismantled himself. The charges real, the fortune forfeit, the empire gone. He pleaded to what he'd done and took a sentence he could survive, and the dangerous men above him went away for the rest of their lives. Ji-woo got the justice she could never have reached alone. And one gray afternoon after the verdicts, she found out why. She came to Simone's door without warning, no bag, no files this time. She stood on the step a long moment, and when Simone opened it, neither of them said anything at first. I went back through all of it, Ji-woo said finally. How my witness fell into my lap, how the chain above him opened up at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right order. That kind of luck doesn't happen. Her jaw tightened. It was built. Somebody handed me the case of my life and made it look like I did it alone. She looked at Simone. It was you. You turned him. You gave me the men I could never have touched. Simone didn't deny it. You'd have gotten there. No, I wouldn't have. Ji-woo's voice was rough. You took the thing that trapped you, and you made it into my career. After what I said to you in that kitchen. She pressed her lips together, and her eyes were wet, and she shook her head. I'm not okay yet, Simone. I don't know if I'm okay yet. What you did to me was real. I know, Simone said softly. I'm not asking you to be. But you didn't do it to be forgiven. You did it when you thought I'd hate you forever anyway. Ji-woo let out a long, unsteady breath. Then, very quietly, 커피 한잔 할래? Do you want to get a coffee? A pause. Just coffee. That's all I've got right now. And Simone, who had lost everything, felt the smallest crack of light come through a door she'd thought was closed forever. Just coffee, she said. I'd like that more than you know. It wasn't healed, it wasn't close, but it was the first step back, and they both knew it. And Damon? Damon read about it in the news like everyone else. His own world had already come apart by then. The settlement had stripped him. The divorce had marked him. The shine had gone off him in a city that only ever loved the shine. And Yuna, who had never wanted anything but the latter, dumped him the moment he stopped being a rung worth standing on. He ended with nothing. No wife, no mistress, no empire on either side of him. Alone, the architect of his own ruin, and Simone never lifted a finger to do it. She didn't have to. He'd done it himself the day he decided she'd never find out. Then the years passed, and the crime lord ceased to exist, and somewhere inside a quiet prison, the man earned his daylight. The morning he was released, the sky over the prison was the pale gold of very early light. Simone was there. She'd been there for every visit, every month, every year. But this morning, she stood outside the gates with a car and a cup of coffee going cold in her hand, the way she'd once stood at the edge of a pool with a bottle of wine. The same woman, an ocean of living in between. The discarded wife who'd watched her life end at the edge of that pool was gone. The woman waiting at the gates had given up a man who deceived her and chosen one who'd earned his way back to the light, had taken all her hidden power and used it, finally, for the one person who'd never had anyone in his corner. The gate opened. Jin-ho walked out into the morning. No empire behind him. No code to hold together with his bare hands. Just a man, in plain clothes, blinking in the daylight he'd never been allowed to stand in, walking toward the one person on Earth who had freed him and chosen him and waited. He stopped in front of her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The light was very soft. Somewhere a bird was going on about the morning. "You came," he said, as if, even now, after every promise, he'd half expected to find no one. "I told you I would." She reached up and touched his face. "I'm always going to be the one at the end." He closed his eyes. And then the orphan who had never had anyone in his life, the man with no family, no name worth keeping, no Sunday table anywhere on Earth, said the thing he had never once in his life been able to say to another human being. "만나고 싶어." "I want to meet them." He opened his eyes. "Your family. I want to meet your family." And Simone Park, who had thrown her family away, burned her home down for a lie, crossed an ocean and lost herself and clawed her way back, felt the last broken piece of her quietly come home. Because she was going to call them. She was Simone Carter again now, on her own terms, and she was going to call Atlanta and the Sunday table that no longer set her place, and she was going to set it again. The one who'd lost a family, and the one who'd never had one. A matched set, made whole at last, the two of them, walking into the morning to go find the family they'd build together. She took his hand. "Come on," she said. "They're going to love you." And they got in the car, and they drove toward the light. If this story moved you, comment where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you waited through every twist for that gate to open, do me a kindness, like this video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There are more stories like this coming, and I'd love for you to be there when they do. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.